Yossi present check-in and check-up for your health. Do you or a loved one suffer from heart health problems? If so, this show is for you. Did you know heart disease is the #1 killer for all U.S. adults and stroke is the #5 killer and the leading cause of disability? Now, as frightening as those statistics are, the risk of getting those diseases are even higher for Black people. Now, the good news is that Black people in the U.S. can improve their odds of preventing and beating these diseases by taking simple steps to address and improve heart health. Life's Essential 8 are the key measures for improving and maintaining cardiovascular health as defined by the American Heart Association. Better cardiovascular health helps lower the risk of heart disease, stroke, and other major problems. In addition to seeing your doctor regularly, eating better, being more active, getting healthy sleep, and managing blood pressure and other behaviors and factors are vital to achieving optimal health. Today, joining Sybil in our discussion about Life's Essential 8 are comedian Torry and Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah. Get ready to take some notes, join us in the chat with your heart health questions, and learn more about Life's Essential 8 at heart.org. And now, here's Sybil.
Hello, I'm Sybil Wilkes, and welcome into our discussion about Life's Essential 8. On behalf of the American Heart Association and our company, Yossi Media, welcome into what promises to be a life-saving conversation about Life's Essential 8. What is that? We'll talk about it. If you've been reading our newsletter, our What You Need to Know newsletter that we have been talking about for the last several weeks, we'll focus on the need to create a plan to maintain good health. We can't stress enough what it means to have an important key as getting into Life's Essential 8 in the process of developing a healthy lifestyle. And we're looking to the American Heart Association's Life's Essential 8. This is a set of 8 key measures for improving and maintaining cardiovascular health. We're at the beginning of the spring season, although I must say in some parts of the country, spring came and then it left again really quickly. But I promise we are in spring season. And it is a time to talk about renewal. We're also approaching a holiday event that will bring families together and a time to think about renewal in this still new year. We want to get a jump start on something today as we continue to formulate and change our health goals for the year. And here to help me get a jump start on that conversation are 2 very special guests and friends of the show. Let's start with ladies first there, Torry. Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah is a volunteer expert of the American Heart Association, and she does so much more. She is a board member of the American Heart Association Baltimore and Greater Maryland area, an independent assistant professor at the Johns Hopkins Schools of Nursing and the Department of Epidemiology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. That's a lot to put on a business card. And yet still there's more. So I'm the faculty at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Equity and a fellow and board member of the Preventative Cardiovascular Nurses Association. As a nurse scientist and cardiovascular disease epidemiologist, her program of research seeks to reduce disparities in cardiovascular health among African descent populations locally and globally, as we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, through epidemiological and community engaged methods. Whew! I feel like I've gotten my workout for the day. Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is the 3rd time we're doing this, so I guess 3rd time's the charm. But it's such a pleasure to be on your show, and good to see you again, Guy.
Good. Likewise.
Stand-up comedian, is a star of film and television. He has been in the funny chair with us on the Joyner Show. He's also created, developed, and produced the documentary Fat Tuesdays. If you have not seen it, find it and take a look at it and enjoy all of the history of a comedy phenom that became a home for Black comedians in Los Angeles. And Guy, almost 30 years ago.
I know. I was thinking about that. Next year will be 30 years. So as I'm pitching these new Fat Tuesday shows, I'm going in with that. Like, you got to put this next series up for the 30th anniversary.
Absolutely. And also, we'll also find out that Guy's working on himself, and a lot of it is connected to Life's Essential 8. As we were talking about this, Guy, it was like you are the perfect person at this time to come on and talk about it, because Dr. Mensah, let's start out and let's talk about life's essential 8. And we can start, I mean, obviously, those are 8 things that we need to work on in order to get our health in order, as well as to provide good cardiovascular health. I don't know where you'd like to start. I'd like to start with our diets. And number 1, eating healthily. What does that look like, and what does that mean?
Well, before you start, when you see me doing this, I'm actually taking notes. I'm not texting. I'm actually taking notes, because this will be notes. I'm not texting or on social media. Strictly texting.
And before we talk about that, Dr. Mensah, guys made a good point. When I talk about this, Guy, we ran down all of these things: eating healthy, being active, weight management, controlling your cholesterol, maintaining good blood pressure, maintaining blood sugar, stopping the use of tobacco, and getting good sleep. You are almost able to check off all of those things.
All the boxes, man.
All of them. All of them. And you're not alone. It's something that we should all be doing. Isn't that right, Dr. Mensah?
Absolutely. And Guy, you're not alone in this journey. So I'm so thrilled that we have the opportunity to talk about Life's Essential 8, which is an American Heart Association concept. It's essentially a science-based recipe for a longer, healthier life. So it's not enough to live long. We want to live long, healthy lives. So I think you said we want to start with eating healthy, which is a challenge for all of us. So we know that eating better is linked with better heart health. And so what do we mean by that? We mean that we should all consume a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables and lean protein, and also try to limit our intake of certain foods, such as sugary drinks, foods that are high in saturated fats. So I like to say food is medicine. Really, how do we rethink how we eat and what we eat to promote a healthy life? And also moderation. So I think we all know there are a number of diets out there, and some of us have tried one too many diets. Really the key message is to eat in a way that you know you can sustain this dietary pattern. So we don't like to focus on diet. So I'm sure people have heard of the Mediterranean diet, different diets, and low carb diets, keto diets, you name it. But I think the important message is what we're taking in and what we're also trying to limit. And we know that fruits and vegetables are linked with better heart health, but also consuming good nuts, right? So going nuts for nuts. So peanuts, these are foods that are high in protein, but are low in saturated fats, which may be linked with heart disease as well.
When you talk about nuts, I'm sorry, go ahead, Guy.
I was gonna say you left off one thing, Sybil, unless I missed it, was stress. That's not part of diet, but that's another thing that we need to control. And as I talk about stress, and that a lot of stress leads to heart attacks, let's make sure we check on Puffy and see where Puffy is his stress level right now.
It's very high, I would imagine. Even those of us who are just getting the news about his personal and professional situation, stress plays a big part. And in someone's lifestyle like yours, Guy, as you are running from one city to another, flying and promoting your shows and things like that. So we will talk about that. In terms of nuts, are there any? You mentioned peanuts, and I've often been told that peanuts aren't good for us because of the saturated fats that may be prevalent in them. Are there better nuts, for instance, as opposed to one as opposed to another?
So in general, nuts are good for you. So when we think about nuts, we associate it with oils, right? So we know that animal fats. So when we think about a good steak, the fat that comes from animals has high cholesterol.
Right.
When we think about peanuts, cashew nuts, so these nuts are generally healthier. They don't have cholesterol, and they are linked with better heart health. So if you must snack, consider nuts, but also how the nuts are prepared. Sometimes we take a good thing and we coat it with a lot of sugar and a lot of salt. So if you go to these stores and you buy a pack of nuts, sometimes they're coated with a lot of salt and sugar, but really trying to consume nuts in the basic form without a lot of preservatives is better for your heart health.
And
I was gonna say is I've been researching, I've been stepping up my game and eating healthier. So I heard Brazilian nuts are really good to eat as well. I eat a lot of pistachios as well, and also those seeds in there as well. So flax seeds and
hemp seeds I've tried recently.
Hemp seeds?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
I put them on my breakfast, or if I'm having oatmeal or something like that, or maybe a bowl of ice cream. But but
moderation.
Yeah, for sure, just a little scoop.
Vegan ice cream.
Right. Thank you very much, Guy. Doctor, for those of us that are trying to do this and eat healthily in a personal setting where we're trying to prepare our own foods, I've often heard that your best bet when you're going to the grocery store is to walk the outside of the perimeter of the interior of the grocery store. So all of those things you'll find your fresher items to include in your diet. Is that right?
Absolutely. So what you just described, Sybil, are perishable foods. So you think about your vegetables and your fruits, they're usually on the periphery, and they're ultimately better than highly processed foods. So what do we mean by that? So the chips, anything that's bagged, anything that is highly processed. When we think about meats as well, there are certain foods that I generally encourage people to avoid if you can. Really, you think about luncheon meats, salami, like anything that's also canned. And as we're talking about diet, sodium is another ingredient that we have to be very mindful of, and also reading food labels, because a high sodium diet is linked with hypertension, which we know is an important issue, and we'll get to it. So really, as you stressed, foods that are perishable are generally healthier, but foods that are highly processed are not as healthy for all of us.
And just because you can't taste it doesn't mean the sodium is not in there, right?
Right. It not to be nuts over nuts, but pine nuts are another one too that is a very healthy source. They're a little bit expensive, but it's worth it. And I always say this about eating healthy. And when people say, well, it costs too much to eat healthy, to eat organic, and I always tell them, pay now or pay later.
Right.
Either pay the price for it now, or eat like you want to eat, don't eat healthy, and pay later in medical bills and hospital bills. So you're going to pay either way. So pay now or pay later. When you pay later, you're going to pay in medicine and time and inconvenience of going to get these checked out and work out, but also just you're going to pay in the pain that you're going to get. So it's just better really to start and spend the extra money for the foods that are healthier, rather than being up in the hospital or being bedridden later. If you're just eating any type of way you want to eat.
Thank you, Dr. Guy. Let's move on to the second essential 8, and being active and revving up our exercise routine, if you will. And how can we best get started with that, Dr. Commodore Mensah?
So number 2 is getting active. So just as we said, food is medicine. Exercise is also medicine, and there are recommendations for how much exercise we should all get in a week. So for instance, 150 minutes of moderate intensity and 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise. So anything that makes our heart beat a lot. But I just generally like to say any activity is better than no activity. So we used to emphasize the number of minutes, and a lot of people felt guilty if they only got maybe 20 minutes in a week. But the key message is simple things such as walking. You don't need a gym membership to get your activity in. And sometimes you can go window shopping. Just leave your wallet in the car and just walk around the mall, right? Just walking is the simplest form of physical activity that is ultimately going to improve your heart health. And so any activity is better than no activity. Increasing your physical activity also helps to improve your blood pressure, We've talked about diet. Diet also helps to improve blood pressure. Physical activity also helps to improve blood pressure. And if you are overweight or have obesity, being active also helps to what? Improve your numbers. As you lose weight, it also improves your numbers. So again, exercise is also medicine, but we can creative ways to get in that activity. We're supposed to get what, 5 miles a day? Most of us do a lot of sitting, a lot of sitting. And if you work behind the computer, it's possible that you're spending 8 hours of your day sitting. What are some ways to maybe stand instead of sit? Or when you get off, try to sneak in some physical activity, park further away from the entrance of the store. So these, and there are strategies you can use at home in the comfort of your home. There's YouTube, there are a lot of videos out there, right? As we're scrolling through Instagram and social media, how do we also maybe favorite some of these pages that have really short, physical activity videos that we can engage in as well?
Does this ring true with you, Guy?
A couple of things I want to say. One, it was years ago, my dad was in the hospital, and one of the nurses or orderlies, I can't remember which one it was, this young man was talking about, how he had picked up this stray dog, and he had took the dog in, and he said he was helping the dog by rescuing it and taking it on walks every day. And what ended up happening was, because he was taking this dog on a walk every day for 30 minutes, he ended up getting healthier. He had high blood pressure. He had, and he said, and that's what he said. He said, I thought I was saving the dog's life, and the dog actually saved my life. He said, when I was going in for checkups after I got this dog, his blood pressure went down, and everything, cholesterol and everything. So walking is very important. And I recently read this article where why sometimes the Chinese live so long, or Asian communities, because they're active. They're always, like, some of them don't even have couches in their home, because when you have a couch, you're going to lounge all day. But they purposely not have couches and chairs and things like that where you can lounge and sit for a long period of times. And they're very active, so they live longer, and they have less, I guess, lower blood pressure and lower cholesterol because of the walking and the physical that they do. So being active is very, very, very important. I get a lot of exercise in airports, walking from gate to gate. Instead of taking the tram, I don't do the tram. I'll walk it instead of taking the tram. Or if it's on the moving sidewalk in the airport, the people movers, I'll walk instead of taking that. I'll take the stairs instead of taking the escalator. So there's ways you can get your steps in, you can get your exercise in, and get your movement in. Because I'm on a plane sitting all the time.
Right.
I'm always sitting on a plane for a long time. So that right there is hazardous to your health. Years ago, I don't know if I told you this, Sybil, I may have talked about it on the show before, but I got a blood clot in my leg because of flying so much. I wasn't wearing compression socks. I wasn't working out, eating at the time, and I had stopped drinking, which thins your blood. But because when you fly a lot, you're supposed to get up and walk around every 90 minutes to circulate your blood, or wear compression socks, and that helps you. Because I wasn't doing that, I ended up getting a blood clot, and I could have been taken out of here. The doctor said if I didn't come into the doctor's room until at the last minute. But walking and being very active will kill all of that stuff.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Dr. Yvonne?
Yes, and I love what Guy said about intention. So being intentional. So some of the strategies that he shared, taking those extra steps, like making better choices in terms of choosing to stand. If you're binge watching one of your favorite shows, who says you can't stand and watch it, right? As you're standing, if you pace around, you're still not sitting. I think we say sitting is a new smoking. We do a lot of sitting. And so it really takes that extra effort to be able to get those additional steps in. And we know that the more you do to get your heart beating, the better your heart health as well. So anything that makes your heart beat, Guy.
you know what I would do sometimes is either if I'm in a gym in a hotel and I want to catch up on my shows, I take my iPad and I'm watching my shows as I'm on the treadmill, or at home on the Peloton. Instead of watching the beautiful women on the Peloton screen, I will catch up on my shows. So I feel like I'm killing two birds with one stone. When I'm catching up on my shows, I'm not sitting on my butt on the couch doing it, but I'm actively working out, but also catching up on show. And when you do that, it makes the time pass so much quicker on those exercise machines when you're watching your favorite program.
That's absolutely right. So, Doctor, this leads us to the next of the Life's Essential 8, and that is, and it seems like we've been talking about this, weight management, managing our weight. We talked about, a healthy diet. We talked about being active. That's all a part of weight management, but are there other things we need to consider in terms of that?
Yes, so when we talk about weight management, in some cases, some of us have a few more pounds to lose, and during COVID, some of us gained weight and have had a hard time sort of losing that weight. But I also think it's important to stress not just focusing on the scale and the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that body mass index is one of the ways that we can determine if someone's overweight or has obesity, but really also focusing on your waistline, right? Are you really losing the fat in the right places? Mm-hmm. So sometimes it can be discouraging when you feel like, well, I'm doing the right things. I've changed my diet, I'm being active, but I've only lost like 2 pounds. But what I like to emphasize is that don't just focus on the numbers on the scale, because sometimes you lose fat, but what do you gain in return? Muscle, right? So your
muscle weighs more.
Yes, right, exactly. And it may take some more time, but really focusing on your heart health and your fitness. How long can you go doing a specific activity without stopping? So yes, BMI and weight is important, but also the waistline. So if you carry more fat around your waistline, that is linked with worse heart health than carrying your fat, right? And at least for women, right, having wider hips. So carrying your fat around your hip circumference is linked with better heart health than carrying the fat around your gut. So that's another thing to measure. Do your clothes fit a little looser, right? So if you're going from a size 10 to an 8, you're doing the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we know that the more of you there is, the harder your heart has to work. And that's why, and I also like to say, sometimes weight can be a very dicey topic, right? And so the most important thing is to focus on health, right? What does being healthy look like for you? What are ways that you can have realistic goals to achieve health? And we know that in this day and age, also obesity is a disease. I think we're recognizing that it's not a moral failing. Once upon a time, if we saw someone with obesity, then we would make all sorts of assumptions. But we know that and some people, they just may have a harder time losing weight, and it's maybe no fault of theirs. So the additional resources that are available, in addition to lifestyle, we know that in some cases, people may need medication or they may need surgery, because in some cases, when people take that extra step, it helps them to get healthier. So I think we are now open to all forms of getting to a healthier weight, and also not really focusing on sort of a person's moral or the lifestyle per se, but also acknowledging that sometimes our environments may make it hard for us to maintain a healthy weight. And so what are additional resources we can provide to people to get to a healthy weight?
Guy, has that ever been a problem for you?
I mean, people think that, because I'm my size, that I don't have weight issues sometimes. And I do. Sometimes, along my midsection, I'm always, conscious about that. And it brings up a question I've always wanted to ask, and I can ask when I ask the doctor this: how often do they update those charts of where your weight should be according to your height, your age, and everything? Because I think some of those were done way back, like in the 50s, and now our things have changed since then. So sometimes I'm so focused on what that chart says, and I could be wrong. And those other people out there who rely on those charts could be wrong too. So do they update those charts, or they're still standard across the board?
And do they maintain differences in the ethnicities too? Is that
part too?
Of it?
Yes, this comes up all the time. We talk about how these body mass index standards were derived. And we know that, yes, they were derived from primarily Caucasian populations. So, for instance, we know that for Asian populations, some of the BMI cutoffs have been adjusted to acknowledge that even at lower BMI, there are Asian people who may still have a higher risk for heart disease. So then the other argument is made. So what about for Black people? Should we adjust, the BMI cutoffs? But I think generally we know that there's ample research that links obesity with heart disease. But I want to go back to the point I made earlier that yes, BMI is one of those measures, but it's an imperfect measure of heart health. And that's why we consider other things in addition to your waist circumference, your waist to hip ratio, because you have two people. I use this example, like you look at a football player who has a BMI of 30, right? And you think, well, in that case, they may have a BMI of 30 because they have a lot of muscle, right? So the BMI does not account for the amount of muscle a person has. So it's not perfect. You compare that person who's a football player to someone who has a BMI of 30, but is more fat than muscle. So yes, there are limitations, but generally we like to say that, where you carry your fat matters, and trying to sort of reduce sort of the fat in your midsection improves your heart health.
So let's talk about something that that we know we should do, but we may not have enough information about it, and that's controlling our cholesterol. And let's start with just explaining what is cholesterol for people, and is there a level that we should be aiming for?
Yes, absolutely. So what is cholesterol? So cholesterol is this waxy substance that's in your bloodstream and cells. So there are different types of cholesterol. So we have the good and the bad cholesterol. So when we say good cholesterol, that's HDL. So if you've ever heard the term HDL from your doctor, this is high density lipoprotein. So this is the good cholesterol. For women, we want it to be more than 50. And for men, we want it to be more than 40. So when you have your numbers checked, look at HDL. If you're a man, you want it to be more than 40. And for a woman, you want it to be more than 50. Then we have the bad cholesterol, which is LDL. So it's low density lipoprotein cholesterol. So for this, we also want it to be less than 100, right? So whether you're a man or woman, the ideal number is less than 100. So the HDL helps to clear the bad cholesterol, or the LDL, from your bloodstream. So those are the two numbers. We also have total cholesterol that calculates the total of your HDL, LDL, and also your triglycerides. But one thing I'll say is that cholesterol usually comes from two sources. One is your body. So your body makes all the cholesterol it needs. The second source is food made from animals. Earlier, I talked about animal fats. So you think about animals that we consume, so the steaks, so anything that is red meat but fat, that is also another source of cholesterol. And that's why there's a big push now for plant-based diets, right? So those diets are lower in sort of cholesterol, because you're not consuming animal products. And so it also helps with your cholesterol. So for anyone who's struggling with cholesterol issues, and I'll admit it, it can creep up on you. So as we're having this conversation, last month I had my numbers checked, and my LDL cholesterol, which was supposed to be less than 100, was 110. And I didn't know it. And that's why it's important to know your numbers. So as we're talking, Guy, you're not the only one who's having to manage this. A lot of us are actually living this, where you think you're fine and you go to the doctor and you get your numbers and you're like, hold up, where did this come from, right? So that information is power. And that information also has helped me to change my diet. There are things that I'll pass on, knowing that my numbers are not where they need to be. I'm not taking medication yet, but I'm more conscious of what I consume because my cholesterol numbers have increased slightly.
So just from your experience, what are you eating that has helped you to do this on your own, as opposed to medication?
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, more fruits and vegetables, really cutting back on a lot of meat, red meat. I don't really consume red meat these days. I'm opting for more fish, more seafood, right? So these are foods, and fish is high in good fats, right? So we talked about the good and the bad fats. So I'm not really consuming a lot of meat. And also with eggs, I've always loved eggs. I can consume 3-4 eggs, but the regular egg has a lot of cholesterol. So I went to Costco the other day and I got egg whites. So egg whites are good for you because they are high in protein, but they have very little cholesterol because they don't have yolk. So if you get a carton of egg whites, you don't really have the added cholesterol compared to if you had like regular eggs from the store. So that's one of the strategies. I'm opting for egg whites over regular eggs.
Guy,
Well,
is that a consideration for you?
Yeah, I have three things I want to say of what she said. One, plant-based, which you have to watch, be very careful about plant-based because some of the stuff is manufactured in a plant, a big building called a plant. So when they put plant-based on there, they're not lying. It may not be the plant-based you think you're buying. It's coming out of a plant, an actual building. So you got to be careful when you read those labels about plant-based, and they get away with that because they're not lying. The other thing is eggs. I was going to ask you about the farm-raised eggs, the EB eggs that you see in the grocery store with the EB label on. Are those better or not? Or is just regular, like eating like regular eggs? I mean, what's the benefit of eating those eggs opposed to the regular eggs and then egg whites?
Right. So I think for egg whites, we know that they're lower in cholesterol. Right, but when it comes to eggs, usually free-range chickens, and so there's a lot of, in terms of the health benefits, organic and free-range chickens. So those things are thought to be healthier because when you think about how some of the chickens are raised and some of the options out there, and the reality is not everyone can afford it, right? So we know that sometimes the things that are good for you, and we think about the reasons why as a nation we struggle with a lot of these issues. The healthy foods should be just as affordable as the foods that are not as healthy. So you're absolutely right. There are a lot of options out there, but I usually say whatever is in its natural state, right? If you can afford it, go for it. And over some of these sort of mass-produced foods as well.
And you can separate if you can only afford regular eggs, you can separate your egg whites from the yolk and
exactly
do that on your own.
And I agree. I know everyone, right? It's not easy. I know everyone's, have different income levels and things like that. But what I've learned to do is like I said, pay now or pay later.
Yeah, right.
So what I've done was start to balance. If I have to pay more for something, then let me cut out something. I was spending a lot of money on things that was basically destroying my life than things that was helping my life, as far as smoked cigars and alcohol, right? And lounging. If you cut back on some of those and push that budget toward eating healthier, you can afford it. Now, for everybody, it's not cigars and alcohol. It could be another vice that you're doing that's not healthy, or something else that you're doing that's not healthy, something else you're consuming that's not healthy. So maybe cut that budget back on those bad snacks and push that money toward the healthier items. And that way you can maybe be able to afford and pay now rather than pay later.
And doctor, I will, and like Guy, I, am in the process of making changes. And one of the things I do love that I cannot give up at this point is a good cup of coffee. 1 cup of coffee a day.
Bad for your kidneys.
Right. And as a part of that, having a creamer and doing away with the creamer. So I started to do pistachio milk, right? Because some of the creamers that you see in the store, they say they're plant-based. They also have other chemicals in them that are not good for you, right? Gum is one of those things. And so you have to read the labels and you have to make sacrifices, as Guy said, in order to accommodate this new lifestyle.
No, absolutely. So your point is reading the labels, knowing what you're consuming. But honestly, most of us are always in a hurry. We just grab things on the shelf. When you go to the grocery store, you're like, I got 30 minutes, just grab it. But taking that extra time and also doing this as a family too. This is one of the things I do with my son, where when we go shopping, and now he's aware. He'll say, oh, this has this much sodium. Because when you look at it, if you have a bag of chips that has 1,200 milligrams of sodium and you're going to sit and consume the whole bag.
Yeah.
And most people don't even pay attention to the
We're not
number
even
of
conscious of
servings.
it. Yeah.
Right. So it says 1,200 milligrams, but there are 4 servings. So
And a
if you eat a
serving is
whole
like
bag,
this.
this is like that.
Right,
If you
right,
eat
right,
the whole
right.
bag, that's 1,200 milligrams of sodium that you've consumed in one sitting. But as we said earlier, really sodium, a diet that is high in sodium is linked with higher blood pressure. So especially if you're diagnosed with high blood pressure or hypertension, sodium is one of the things you have to be super cautious. We talk about canned foods. So if it's canned, there are things that you can do. So if it's canned vegetables, you can actually rinse the vegetables to get rid of the extra sodium. If you can only afford canned, I usually say opt for frozen. So if you have frozen beans versus canned beans, go for frozen, because the frozen doesn't have as much sodium. But in many cases, the can may be cheaper, and that's what you may have access to. Right. So when you open it, drain it, rinse it, and to get rid of the excess sodium.
I didn't know that. Okay, that's good to know. I rarely eat out of a can, but that's very good to know.
So let's move to something that we do know about, and many of us know about, having the pressure, as our family members used to call it, maintaining a good blood pressure. And the statistics are startling, alarming, and yet people aren't taking these numbers to heed. Nearly 1 in 2 Americans have high blood pressure, and many don't even know it. So first of all, can you start with what is a good blood pressure? What should we be aiming for? And what do the numbers mean?
Absolutely. So I'm glad we're talking about hypertension or high blood pressure. It's my favorite thing to talk about, especially
I bet you're a lot of fun at a cocktail party.
Yeah. It's like, you want to know about high blood pressure. But really, I think it's important to talk about it because we know that in Black people, high blood pressure is really one of the contributors to heart disease. And the general population, we know that high blood pressure is the leading risk factor for cardiovascular disease, for strokes. It also affects our kidneys. And get this, and most people are shocked to learn this, high blood pressure is linked with what? Vascular dementia.
Yeah.
So you think about brain health. We used to just focus on heart health, but now high blood pressure is linked with brain health. And so when we think about the reasons why we should take this seriously, hypertension can do a lot of damage to our body. So what do we mean? So we know that usually there are 2 numbers. The top number is what we call your systolic blood pressure. And the bottom number is what your diastolic blood pressure. So a healthy blood pressure is what? Less than 120/80. So if your numbers are higher than 120/80, you know that you may be at risk for developing heart disease, right? And so even if your top number, your systolic blood pressure is 128, 130, sometimes people feel like, well, it's not that high, but we know that there are things you can do to reverse that with just lifestyle. Going back to what we said earlier, food is medicine, exercise is medicine. And the thing, and so you mentioned this, high blood pressure can creep up on you. It is a silent killer. You can go years and not know this. I'm just reflecting on an experience I had almost a month ago at a church in Baltimore where we were doing screenings. We're checking blood pressures for church goers to educate them about hypertension. And one of the participants said, you know what, doctor, I've been exercising, I've been very active, and I just retired, but my blood pressure has creeped up suddenly because when I checked his blood pressure, it was high. And so we started talking, and he said, I run almost 3 times a week. I'm very active, but my blood pressure keeps increasing. And then we started talking, and he said, well, now I binge watch Netflix shows. And then he said, and every time I watch my shows, I have a cup of soup, chicken noodle soup.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Canned soup. So for the past 4 months, he had been enjoying his soup because he thought soup is healthy, it had good vegetables. Exactly. But in 3 months, his blood pressure had increased because of the soup. And he was not aware of it. And I think you made this point earlier. Sometimes people just don't know. And so this is where it's important, why it's important to use platforms such as yours to educate people about sort of paying attention to what you're consuming when you purchase things. How much sodium does this have? If you have hypertension, how can you avoid certain foods or consume less of it? So if you have high blood pressure, food is medicine, exercise is medicine, but also taking your medicines as prescribed. I like to say this because in some cases, just lifestyle is enough to improve your blood pressure. But for people whose blood pressure may be 160 over 100, at those levels, you may need medications immediately, in addition to the lifestyle changes, because if your blood pressure remains high for too long, it can do serious damage to your heart, to your kidneys. So it's important to bring those numbers down. But it's medicines plus lifestyle. I always like to emphasize that these are things that people can do. You can also check your blood pressure at home. If you have hypertension, please invest in a blood pressure device. In many cases, your insurance company may cover it, but if insurance doesn't cover it, as Guy said, you can think about other ways to cut back. You can get a blood pressure device for about $60, maybe skipping 3 or 4 cocktails.
That investment that you have
exactly to do. Investment. So skip 3 or 4 cocktails and invest in a blood pressure device that you can use at home to measure your numbers, to actually see it as you're taking your medicines as prescribed. Is your blood pressure improving? As you're being active and watching your diet, is your blood pressure improving? And the most important thing is sharing those numbers with your provider. So it's one thing to write those numbers on a piece of paper at home and keep it, but please do share the numbers with your provider, because they may make changes. There may come a point where maybe you're taking too much of your medicine because your blood pressure is better, or too little. So it's important to really monitor your numbers at home with a device.
Let's also bring in something that Guy talked about, and that is stress. Does that play a big part in your blood pressure numbers? Or can
yes,
it?
Absolutely. And I think we are also acknowledging that the mind, the heart, and the body are connected. Once upon a time when we talked about heart health, we'll talk about hypertension, high cholesterol. And when it gets to stress, we just leave it there. But we're acknowledging that if you are stressed, poor psychological health affects what you choose to eat, your ability to exercise. If you're down or depressed, you're not going to want to exercise. You're not going to want to go for a walk. But if you do exercise, it helps to release endorphins, the happy hormones that make you feel better. And that's why we say the more you exercise, it also helps to improve your mental state. But stress definitely affects our food choices. When you're stressed, what do you opt for? The sugar, the fat, right? And the salt, right? Wow. So those are foods that unfortunately we may use to cope. But Guy, it looks like you have something to add.
Yeah. Or you go shopping, and that money could have been used by buying the healthier choices. Some people, when they stress, they go shopping.
Yes. Yeah.
And then whatever your money reliever is.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And you can put that money toward buying the healthier choices of food. And so I have a few but I have a few questions I want to ask.
Okay, we're gonna try to leave room, but we are getting close to our end time. We talked about salt, and we talked about proteins and things like that, and fat. But what about blood sugar? Can you talk about that? And is there a recommended blood sugar level, and how do we maintain that?
Absolutely. So we know that blood glucose, or we call it blood sugar, it's fuel for your body. So your body needs it. But if you have too much of it, if your blood sugar remains high over time, that's when we talk about diabetes. So again, it's important to know your numbers. And it's one of those things, it may be creeping up. So we talk about hemoglobin A1C, or sometimes a doctor may order a fasting blood glucose. And that's why it's important to not skip your annual checkups. So as you get older, it's very important, because these things creep up on you. You go 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you have high cholesterol, diabetes. So it's important to really implement some of the strategies we talked about in terms of diet. And in some cases, you may have what we call pre-diabetes. So you don't have diabetes yet. And there are studies that have shown that if you're in the pre-diabetic range, just lifestyle. And when we say lifestyle, it's not that I feel like doing this today, I'm not going to do this. We're talking about intensive lifestyle modification can help to reverse prediabetes. There are people who've avoided taking medications, so insulin or oral glycemic agents, using just lifestyle. So it's important to consider how we may use lifestyle to reverse pre-diabetes, but in many cases, and if you do have diabetes, it's still important to know your numbers, but also implement these changes that we're talking about. But food and diet. So we keep going back to it because that is really the cornerstone if you still want to improve your blood sugar.
And the next to the last item, this is number 7 on the Life's Essential 8. This is something I've not had a problem with, but one of us on this program does, and that is the use of tobacco. And Guy is infamous for his love and appreciation for a good cigar. Can you talk about the importance of maintaining some sort of discipline when it comes to tobacco use?
First, I'll say it's hard, right? It may be hard for a lot of people to give up this habit, but smoking really is the single largest preventable cause of death in the U.S., right? It's one thing that if you stop, and if you stop in a month, you're going to reverse a lot of damage that has been done over the years. So especially if, let's say, you have hypertension and you have high cholesterol, also smoking puts you at much higher risk for heart disease. But the good news is that there are resources because, again, we are acknowledging that it's hard for a lot of people to quit. And so there are resources that are available, and also understanding where people are. If someone's not ready, you just have to work with them and figure out, when they will be ready, but also trying to encourage them to consider what's their why, right? If I give up this habit, what are the health impacts? How is that going to make me live a longer, healthier life? But also focusing on the rewards. So the reward will be that if you quit today, in 30 days, your body will see the benefits. You're going to actually reverse some of the damage that has been done in terms of smoking as well.
I can speak to that, facts, because at the end of 2022, I did 6 months of no cigars and no alcohol. And I do it every once in a while just to know that I have control over it. It doesn't have control over me. But I also balance it with taking herbs for the lungs. I think it's mullein leaf. It's an herb that helps clean your lungs. So I'll try to balance the bad with the good. But I have cut back. I have cut down. And when we talk about stress, what we just talked about, sometimes, people smoke cigars because of anxiety and because of stress. Now, for those who smoke weed, I don't, but can you talk to, what does marijuana do for those out there who smoke as far as like cutting back? Are they in the same category with cigars and cigarettes?
So it's unclear, but some early evidence suggests that smoking marijuana may not be ultimately good for your heart health. So we need longer term studies, but it's one of those things that it doesn't help your heart health, right? And so as we wait for, accumulating evidence to understand what are the overall long-term impacts, what are ways that we can cut out some of these habits, but for some people it takes time. But the good news is, you still putting those carcinogens
in. You're still putting the carcinogens in your body,
exactly,
no matter what you smoke.
Because your body's a temple. Think about what we're putting in our bodies, and really a lot of these products have harmful chemicals. They just do so much harm to the body.
I'll say this. We treat our bodies like rent-a-cars rather than Bentleys. If we treat our bodies like Bentleys, we'll be better. Rent-a-cars, when you get a rent-a-car, you don't care what gas you put in it. Right. You don't care how you drive the hell out of it. But a Bentley, you take care of it and get the proper maintenance, and you put the right gas in it. You go the right speed. So if we treat our bodies more like Bentleys, more than rent-a-cars, we'll be all right.
And let me ask you one more thing about what about people who say, well, I don't have a problem. I vape. What do you say to them?
Good question.
It's just as harmful. So there's a lot of research that has come out recently. And so unfortunately, that industry has been very creative in terms of coming up with different flavors that appeal to, unfortunately, younger adults. Right. And this is what is actually more upsetting, that some of their marketing strategies target younger adults. And we know that there are harmful effects of vaping when it comes to heart health. So it's not any better. There's no two ways around it. It's not, good for your heart health, and it's not good for your health, period.
That goes for hookah as well, then, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Anything you're putting in your body that has these chemicals that we know and that are carcinogenic, not good for your heart health.
Let me talk about the thing that affects me most, doctor, and that is sleep or lack thereof. This is number
me too,
8.
Sybil.
Does it? Yeah.
Yes.
And so let's talk about the necessity and how can we get good sleep.
Sybil, we all struggle with this. I know I'm guilty as charged. So here's the reality. Adults are supposed to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So sleeping too little is linked with poor heart health, but sleeping too much, if you're getting 11, 12 hours a night, that's also linked with poor heart health. So that's the recommendation. We know that if you get enough sleep, it helps to repair the cells in your body. It helps to boost your immune system. That is really when your body is rebooting. So think of it that way. And it also, getting enough sleep helps to improve your mood and energy. So think about it. When you have only 4 hours of sleep, how do you feel the following morning?
Nobody wants to get up and eat well or go exercise or all of these other things and keep all of these things juggled, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle.
You said it. I couldn't have said it better. So when you start your day off with a sleep deficit, it affects the choices you make all day, right?
Yeah.
And so, but let's focus on what you can do, because I know our time is short. We talk about cleaning up your sleep hygiene. What is that? So we know that unfortunately, a lot of us have these, right?
Yeah.
Smartphones, right? So that is unfortunately one of the reasons why a lot of people don't get enough sleep. So we talk about moving it away from your bed or your nightstand, charging it further away, dimming the light on your phone, because again, if the light is bright, it doesn't help your brain to shut down and rest at night. Also, setting timers, and also if you need to lock your device or keep it in another room. I know people who will not charge their phones in their rooms at night because they know that they're going to be tempted. As you're waiting to fall asleep, you hop on social media and 30, 40 minutes later, you're still scrolling, right? So that's time that you could have been sleeping, right? So it's hard for all of us, right? But really, these are some of the steps that we can all take to get better sleep and improve our heart health.
So those
the
are
TV too, right? Though not going to sleep with the TV on is another one that some people do that can interrupt your sleep while you're sleeping because of the light from the TV, but also the sound can disrupt you.
Absolutely.
You have we've gone through Life's Essential 8. If you want more information, we always recommend that you go to heart.org for more information. You can see the list and you can see all of the things that Dr. Commodore Mensah has been talking about today. And getting choked up over this idea, obviously. But we do want you to follow heart.org for all of these tips. And let's get started because it is really important. And in terms of where you start, doctor, does it matter, or should we go in a particular order, or let's just get in there and let's get moving?
So as I said at the beginning, Life's Essential 8 is a science-based recipe. So think of it as a recipe. You don't have to start with number 1, which is eating healthy, or ending at getting sleep. I think you know yourself. We all know what we struggle with, and we all know sort of some of the areas for improvement. So just knowing yourself and figuring out what are the 1 or 2 things that I can focus on. If it's getting more sleep, focusing on that. If it's getting more activity. So there isn't really a particular order. I think we just need to know ourselves and know what we need to do to live longer and healthier.
We're going to close out, Guy, and I just want you to just give a little bit of your own personal, you've given your testimony, but give a little bit of advice to people on how to best work these 8 steps and what you would suggest to people. Just a quick note in terms of, because we are limited in time, but just, one of those things that you think has made the biggest difference in your life and you too, Dr. Mensah, because you have talked about, how some of these things have affected you. So what's that one thing that made the biggest difference for you?
Man, I would just say, what I said earlier, pay now or pay later. You're going to pay either way. So just make health. You cut back on some of your stuff that's not building your body up or not making you feel better or extending your life, and spend that money on stuff that does, even if it's, like I said, with the alcohol earlier, it's like, hey, you don't have to buy the $200 bottle of Don Julio, buy the $19.99 bottle of tequila and put that extra money toward eating healthier. But you just got to make those sacrifices, taking the stairs rather than taking the escalator, walking instead of, taking a tram or anything like that. But the two most important things I can say is pay now, pay later, and walk. Get out and exercise and stay active.
Yeah. As soon as we get done here, I'm going to do yoga. So thank you for that. Doctor, what about you? You have talked about, the numbers have started to creep up for you. What's the best advice we can get, free advice we can get from you, doctor?
So I'll say make it fun. When we think of exercise, we think, unfortunately, of going to the gym on the treadmill or jogging. I think it's important to find what makes you happy, right? What brings you joy. So for me, it's getting together with my girlfriends every Saturday at one of my girlfriends' house, and we work together as a group of 4 of us. Mm-hmm. We have a personal trainer who comes over, and we work out together. So
that's awesome.
Again, it's fun because we are getting to share time together, and we're still trying to figure out how to, sneak in 2 more days during the week to work out together. So having that social support system makes a difference. But for me, it's also playing ping pong at home. So again, I get people think ping pong. Yes. So get a table. If you have a basement that's big enough, it's one of those things that it doesn't feel like you're working out, but trust me, in 10 to 15 minutes, you'll be breaking a sweat. So it's important to find what really you enjoy, and don't really have to subscribe. If someone likes to jog, it doesn't mean that you have to do that, but find something that you enjoy, and then it won't feel like work.
Yeah, that's awesome. How can people follow you, Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah?
Absolutely. So I'm on, I guess it's called X now. So Twitter or X at Y Commodore. I'm also on LinkedIn. I look forward to hearing from folks, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
It's also always a great time to spend with you. You're a delight and a font of information too. Guy Torry,
be careful, be careful, doctor. Be careful, doctor, how you say it. You're on X.
Oh goodness, I didn't even think of it that way. I'm on Twitter, also known as X.
It just say Twitter. Yeah, I'm on X. Oh. Just follow me at Guy Torry, GUY. TORRY on Instagram and on Twitter, X, and on Facebook, Guy Torry Live, LIVE.
Awesome. We're going to close out with our jewel for the day. Being loving is about small, everyday gestures that show people they are valued and appreciated, making the world a kinder place. You have done that today. We appreciate your words of wisdom and sharing your lifestyle testimonies with us. And we ask you to please go out there and let's get started on these healthier lifestyles, as Guy has noted, as Dr. Commodore Mensah has noted. And we also would like to thank some folks as a result of this programming. We want to thank our partners at the American Heart Association, including Brittany Glover and Arika Kaysen. And with Yossi Media, we want to thank our producer, and that is Cherie White, as well as the ever wonderful technical producer Chica, and Yolanda Starks-White, our executive producer. Thank you all for joining us. Go to heart.org and you'll thank me later. Take care. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Dr. Yvonne Commodore Mensah.